I'd like to go through some of the criticism that people have about Sufism. But before we do that, would you mind academically just explaining in your words, how do you define Salafi? What does that term actually mean?
Wow. That's a difficult one. Let me say this. Just like I said that the term Sufism is an innovated term, meaning it does not exist in the book or the Sunnah. I'll have to say the term Salafi or As-Salaf or As-Salafus Salih, which means the righteous forebears, is also mustalahun mustahdath, also an innovated term that did not come in the Quran or the Sunnah. It was said that, well, we derive it from the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, which speaks about that the best century are my people, and then those who follow them, and those who follow them. Now, without going into the hadith here, this hadith obviously is sahih, but it doesn't talk about that those people in those generations are necessarily a validation or a standardization on their own. But this hadith is speaking about those generations have better akhlaq or better value system than the generations that will come after, especially when it comes to testimonies and when it comes to witnessing. That's what the completion of the hadith is, but people usually chop it and they take only the first half. And this hadith doesn't have any command to follow any group of the righteous forebears or the righteous latter scholars who come after them. And therefore, the Salafi movement basically recently, and let's say so we don't go far, is a movement that says we follow the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the Salaf. And obviously that's a problem here, because who are the Salaf? The Quran did not define who the Salaf are. The Sunnah did not define who the Salaf are. And this hadith doesn't speak about their practice. It speaks about people who have amana, sidq in their witnessing, akhlaq, and that people will come after them will be less scrupulous in that. And in fact, every Muslim sect from within, every Muslim group within Ahlul Sunnah and within the Shia and within the Khawarij, they all have a Salaf, meaning they all have someone who existed in the first 3 centuries. If we were to take that as a standard, which is inadmissible, to be honest with you, they've all had someone who they actually return to and say, well, this was in the time of the Tabi'een. So everyone, whether you're following the Sunnah or you're an innovator, everyone has somewhere in their forebears who they subjectively call righteous. In fact, the only standardization is the Quran and the authentic prophetic Sunnah. No human being after the Prophet ﷺ can be a standardization at all. They're all exhaust the righteous ones among them exhaust their effort without being infallible, nor can they be a standard on their own. They exhaust their effort in trying to understand and follow the book and the authentic prophetic Sunnah.
So, as Sufis, as Sunnis, clearly we don't reject the importance of the early Muslims, the Salaf, but maybe one of the criticisms I've heard from Salafis, and this isn't a criticism just for Sufis, it's maybe a criticism for people who follow madhabs, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. They say that we need to extract our understanding of religion straight from the Quran and Hadith and not do taqleed. Whereas it's practically impossible for the average Muslim to be able to do that unless every Muslim is a scholar, which we are not. So how do you see that?
With all due respect, Ustad Fahim, I beg to differ. They don't really say that. And if they do, it's chopped. What they actually say is, because none of them, or most of them, or if none of them, they're not mujtahid levels. So they're not people who can decipher directly from the Quran and Sunnah. What they actually say is, we follow the book and the Sunnah with the understanding of the Salaf. And we come again. Who are those Salaf?
Yeah.
Are those Salaf validated textually? Are they mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah textually? Is their view actually those group? Because obviously it's selective group. It's not all the Muslims.
Yeah.
And so unless you think, I think again, I'm claiming that our Salafi brothers in the past 50 years or so, they practically, for practical purposes and quotation purposes, consider the righteous forebears about 5 or 10 people that came towards the end of the third Hijri century and the beginning of the fourth century, and 2 people that came in the 8th century. But Allah Azza wa Jal did not ask us to follow the Salaf or the Khalaf, but He commanded us to follow the Quran
Mm.
and the Sunnah. Obviously, now we come to say, okay, well, Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ. Sure, Allah speaks about the early Sahaba, a group of Sahaba who first were embraced the faith first. Those people who follow them, Allah Ta'ala will be pleased with them. That is about a specific group of the Sahaba. And therefore you see a Shafi'i, for example, calling a Salaf only the Sahaba layer, only
Yeah.
in his book his book Naam. But if you look at the book, just so we understand this issue of how naive this claim of saying I follow the book and the Sunnah with the understanding of the Salaf of this Ummah is so naive,
Mm.
and it's obviously in my view is batil in general. Why? Look, just open up the book of for example, and see Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i died 204, born 150, 204 of Hijrah. He puts, for example, باب اختلاف علي وابن مسعود اختلاف أصحاب النبي. These are chapters, the differences amongst the Sahaba, the difference of Ali ibn Mas'ud, اختلاف العراقيين, the difference of the Iraqis, اختلاف أهل العراق وأهل الحجاز, the difference between the people of Iraq and Hijaz, اختلاف مالك والشافعي, كتاب سير الأوزاعي, the issues of Awza'i and his differences. You will see so many things amongst the Salaf who are different. When you say the understanding of the Salaf, which one of them? And therefore, to be honest with you, the madhahib, when you called Abu Hanifa, you called Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmad bin Hanbal, etc., those people actually what they did is they had a scientific methodology. So there was the Quran and there's the Sunnah. Their scientific methodology was, let's say Abu Hanifa or Shafi'i, rahimahumullah wa radiya anhum, they went and tried to establish a scientific methodology by which they deduce or they understand what these texts of the Quran and Sunnah mean and how can they be practiced. So the madhab of Abu Hanifa, the madhab of a Shafi'i, for example, is not a replacement of the book and the Sunnah. It's an academic, a valid academic, scrupulous attempt, a scientific attempt to understand what the book and the Sunnah want. So if someone comes to me now and tells me, you know what, I don't need a Shafi and Malik, I say, okay, you don't, but you must be as knowledgeable in ulum al-ala, in ulum al-lugha, al-bayan, al-badi' al-ma'ani, in all these sciences and tools, the tools of deducing, then. But if you don't know the difference between this and that, sorry, there has to be an academic methodology, a scientific methodology to deduce from the text. Otherwise, it'll be chaos because it's not scientific and it's not a methodology.
Excellent. Generally, when people, especially of course non-Muslims, when they look at Muslims, they think of Muslims as being Shia or Sunni. But within Sunni, there's so many different categories, titles, and maybe even differences. So we've talked about Sufis, we've talked about Salafis, there's as well Hadith, there's um, in India and Pakistan, we have Brailwis, Deobandis, so all sorts of things. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and I'm a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. How do you define Sunni? What is the Sunni?
Sunni Muslim is a Muslim, in my view, that follows or adheres, at least theoretically, to the book and to the authentic Sunnah. And what I mean by the authentic Sunnah, or the Sunnah in general, let's say, so we don't limit it to the authentic only, the Sunnah that was that scholars of the Sunnah, yani scholars of prophetic tradition, narrated in their books, and that era ended about roughly year 405 of Hijrah by the last reference in Sunnah, last encyclopedia, which was Imam al-Hakim in his Mustadrak. So what happened is, after the Quran, there were scholars that wrote from before Ahmad bin Hanbal, but let's say Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, year 241, up until Al-Hakim, let's say, year 405 of Hijrah. Those people, what they did, and obviously then Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, etc., right? What those people did, with Tabarani 360, what those people did is they went and they collected all possible prophetic narrations. And that became now a pool of collection of prophetic narratives. And those scholars, most of them did not really scrutinize the narrations. They were collectors more than scrutinizers of the narrations. But nevertheless, they did also have some standard, and they actually secluded that which they thought is not prophetic, in a sense of forgeries, and so they've actually compiled books on forgeries. So the one who follows the book and generally the general collection of the prophetic narrative which conveys the Sunnah, that's a Sunni Muslim in general. Obviously now our school of Ahl Sunnah became a bit more distinguished. For example, in the ulum of Iman, yani belief, you had the Ash'ari school,
Yeah.
the Maturidi school, the school of Ahlul Hadith. All those were schools of Ahl Sunnah in matters of creed. In the practice, in the law, you had the school of Malik, school of Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmad bin Hanbal, amongst many others as well. In the school of Ihsan and Tazkiyah, Ahlul Sunnah were known as, people who were under the banner of the school of Al-Junayd al-Baghdadi, Al-Harith al-Muhasibi, Al-Ghazali, 505 of Hijrah, etc. This in general would be Ahlul Sunnah, but oftentimes the only way to define is opposite to the firm beliefs of others, meaning Ahlul Sunnah are not Shia, in the sense they don't believe in the divine imamat of Ali. So that's important. That's a difference. Ahlul Sunnah are not Khawarij, in the sense that they don't slander the Sahaba or Khawarij do takfir of them, and also believe other beliefs, such as if you commit a grave sin, you will be everlastingly in Jahannam, etc., etc. And they're not violent. And nor do they believe, let's say, in rebellion against an oppressive ruler. That's a general view of Ahl Sunnah. So sometimes you have to add things in order to have a general perspective of who Ahl Sunnah are. But in my view, if I was to say, a Sunni Muslim is a person who prioritizes the Quran and the authentic prophetic Sunnah. Full stop.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning also the different schools of Iman or belief. Is it the case, am I wrong to think that every Sunni will either belong to Ash'ari or Maturidi? Because again, going back to the Salafi understanding, I think they they kind of criticized both Ash'ari and Maturidi. So would they still qualify as being Sunni Muslims, or are they a third sect?
So, look, the school of Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, who died 324 of Hijrah, and he was born 260. In the school of Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, who died 333 of Hijrah, those were schools that were formed as a result of many, many sects now emerging within the Muslim Ummah. And everyone is claiming different things. So those scholars want to say, all right, this is who Ahlus Sunnah are based on what we took from the generations before us and based on the Quran and the Sunnah. There was always a tension between the school of the Hanbalis, let's say early Hanbalis, and the other schools within the realm of what we called Ahl Sunnah, meaning not Shia and not Khawarij. Again, I have to borrow that to make it clear.
Yeah.
And there was sometimes a fight on who is really the Ahl Sunnah within that realm. And I think that continued. So Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah was a hadithi man. He was an imam of narrations, يعني راوي للحديث, كان راويا للحديث رحمه الله. He did not really compile any book in aqaid or in creed. But the narrations are taken and they said, all right, these are the narrations. And then it was taken from his students, or those, not necessarily direct students, but those who attributed themselves to his school, who formed a school according to the Ash'aris and the Maturidis and the other school of hadith. They viewed that school, not Imam Ahmad, but those who followed him, such as, for example, Qadi Abu Ya'la, in his Ibtal al-Ta'wilat and others, the bulk of Sunni Muslims, if I was to use that, view that some Hanbali offshoot, not all Hanbalis, they went close to anthropomorphism, if not frank anthropomorphism, likening Allah Azza wa Jal to his creation, such as attributing Allah Azza wa Jal to be within the space-time dimension, at least from one direction.
No,
from one above direction, but limited from other direction. Attributing Allah Azza wa Jal with corporal attributes, though saying, but we don't know what they are. So the hand is literal, but we don't know what it is. The foot is literal, but we don't know what it is. The face is literal, we don't know what it is. The eyes, the two eyes are literal. The two hands are literal, but we don't know what. So they bring this literal word, which does not come in the Quran or the Sunnah. And you'd have to take these words out of their context in the Quran, because even the word hand, let's say if we were to translate, this is a long topic, but let me just say, if you take the word hand, even in the English, out of its context, and you tell me, what does the word hand mean? I'll tell you, hand means a limb. But the truth of the matter is, the Quran cannot be taken out of its context. The ayah is a context. Sibaq, siyaq, and lihaq. There's a context. And therefore, the word hand in the English, if I put a bracket and I say, give me, and then I put an empty space, a hand, you don't understand that you cut your hand and give it to me. You don't understand it as literal hand. If you say someone has got a strong hand on this issue, a strong grip, a control. So, and again, we go into this whole business of differentiation. But yes, basically the Ash'aris and the Maturidis versus some offshoot of the Hanbali school. And this is with us in that some Hanbalis, such as Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, the great-grandson of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who actually wrote a book in criticizing the Hanbalis of his time, such as Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la and others, who went to anthropomorphic approach. Sometimes it's frank, such as in Ibtal Ta'wilat, it's totally frank in a sense. I mean, attributing Allah Azza wa Jal resting, putting a foot on another, wearing shoes, having curly hair, beardless young man. Whoa. And I don't believe in God like that, obviously. I believe in the creator that came,
like a Christian
that
God.
was that the Quran came with, And that's not what, in all honesty, the Hanbalis also, even those who go to anthropomorphism in the Ash'ari and Maturidi views, they say, we're just attributing the word, we're not attributing the meaning. And we are not likening Allah to His creation. And we believe likening Allah to His creation is kufr. So that's very important, meaning even those who are accused of anthropomorphism, and sometimes it's as frank as the examples I told you in Ibtal Ta'wilat is a printed book by Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la rahimahullah. They run from anthropomorphism because they know that the Quran says قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Allah is one, meaning nothing is like Him. By saying لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, there is nothing like Him. And nothing means nothing that you can imagine, and nothing in the world of matter. He is not matter. He is the creator of matter. He is not space. He is not a mass that occupies space. He's the creator of matter, masses, and spaces, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they have to run from that. Nor is He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that you can imagine, because you're a creation, and whatever you imagine is also a creation. And therefore you become an image worshipper if you believe Allah Azza wa Jal to be an image. He is not encompassed by imaginations, nor is He similar to the creation in any way. And therefore, how we know Him by His names, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, unlike other revealed scriptures that we have left, that remain until today, the Quran is very explicit about introducing Allah to you. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لم يلد لم يولد لم يكن له كفوا أحد الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة. You see, so that tawheed that came in the Quran and the authentic prophetic sunnah suffices.